If neither Geralt nor Ciri is the protagonist of Witcher 4, then who should it be? Who should step up to take on the lead role and carry the franchise as it enters the future? Well, if it were up to me, I'd probably hand the reins over to a custom, player-created character. It's not without its own set of issues, but I believe that doing so would allow CD Projekt Red to sidestep many of the biggest problems facing their new Witcher trilogy, and give them an opportunity to create the kind of RPG protagonist we haven't seen in a long time. But before I go on, if you are a Witcher fan, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me with a YouTube channel membership or over on Patreon. My dream is to make these videos full-time someday, and by doing any of those things, you'll be helping make that dream a reality. Kicking off things with the positives of this approach, a player-created protagonist would be following up on what the studio did with Cyberpunk 2077. Obviously, that game did not get off to a great start, but it eventually pulled itself together. It would be interesting to see how the developers would approach their second attempt at this type of thing, and I'm dreaming already about how awesome the game's character creation suite would be. Cyberpunk's was pretty in-depth, and while the Witcher world obviously doesn't have that level of customization, there's plenty of ways CD Projekt Red could allow us to create some really unique, badass-looking characters to step into the driver's seat for Witcher 4. It would also unlock a slew of customization options from a gameplay perspective. The Witcher 3 allowed players to mold their Geralt quite a bit. First with mutagens and abilities that opened up a ton of unique playstyles, and then eventually Witcher armor and equipment for an array of different Witcher schools, many of which are original creations by CD Projekt Red. When you get right down to it, these schools are basically Space Marine chapters, with their own combat doctrines and philosophies on how to go about life on the path. Imagine how cool it would be if we could choose our Witcher school right from the beginning of the game, and approach our journey from the perspective of a noble Griffin School Witcher, or an always-on-the-edge disciple of the Viper School. In structuring this, CD Projekt Red could take some inspiration from their partners over at Talsorian Games, creators of the Witcher TRPG. I'm DMing 2 campaigns of it right now, and though the game certainly has its issues, one area where it excels is character creation. It has, far and away, the best character creation system of any TRPG I've ever played, and helps players, especially those unfamiliar with the lore, to immerse themselves in the world of The Witcher. Considering CD Projekt Red already adapted their work to create Cyberpunk, it would be ironic to see them take some notes from things Talsorian added to their universe. That having been said, all of this could be a lot to manage. There's a point where freedom of customization can make a game unwieldy, and allowing us to choose our Witcher schools from the start of the game might be a bit too ambitious. Honestly, to make it work effectively, it'd probably require playable backgrounds akin to Dragon Age Origins, which is more optional content than most developers are willing to commit to these days. But that might be where the School of the Lynx comes in. If you look at the lore behind the Witcher schools, many of them were founded by Witchers who defected from other schools, like how a group of Bear School Witchers ended up founding the Viper School. We know the School of the Lynx will factor heavily into the game, so perhaps we start out as a Witcher who left the school of our choosing to create their own order. From there, we meet allies and enemies, recruit younglings into our ranks, and repair our crumbling Witcher keep. It'd be a departure from CD Projekt Red's usual style, but if that's the game they're planning for The Witcher 4, then sign me up, because that sounds like something special to me. No matter how they approach it, if done properly, CD Projekt Red could do something truly incredible with this entire trilogy by giving us the type of RPG protagonist we haven't seen in a while. For years, I've been telling people that they should appreciate the Mass Effect trilogy as much as possible, because there will never be another Commander Shepard. By that, I mean that I've long felt that there will never be another player-created protagonist who has the ability to make significant, game-changing choices, carry over those choices to subsequent games, and have them authentically honored across an entire trilogy. Say what you will about Mass Effect 3's ending, but many of its best quests, like the Genophage arc and the Battle for Rannoch, respond to decisions that the player made in the first 2 games. AAA story-based games don't have the flexibility of a tabletop RPG. They can't twist and bend to everything the player does. All of this is to say that when it comes to Mass Effect 3, I find myself more thankful for the choices the developers were able to acknowledge instead of disappointed at what might have been. If there's anyone who can replicate the success of Commander Shepard in a modern-day RPG and prove me wrong, it's CD Projekt Red. I'd love to see how they could develop their version of the continent by allowing you to carry a character and the decisions they make across an entire trilogy. Think about how awesome it would be to have a Yennefer-Geralt-style love affair across 3 games, to start up a romance with a sorceress in Witcher 4, have some ups and downs in Witcher 5, and then settle down together at the end of Witcher 6. Imagine how terrifying it would be to make an enemy of a higher vampire, and have them constantly reviving and chasing you down throughout this new saga, like a narrative version of the Pursuer from Dark Souls 2. Starting their new trilogy with this philosophy would have so much potential. And if you're like me, and you identified heavily with the fatherhood themes of Witcher 3, then how cool would it be to take on an apprentice early in the trilogy, and then see them mature into adulthood by the end? There is so much they could do here, and if CD Projekt Red were to commit to this type of philosophy, I truly believe they could pull off a series that would define the next generation of RPGs. It would also allow them to sidestep the Ciri-Geralt debate. There are some folks who will never accept anyone other than Geralt in the lead role, and while a custom character is by no means a replacement for him, it might be the only thing they'd view as a strong substitute. But I think the best thing about a custom character is that it would unshackle the developers from a narrative perspective. Geralt is a great RPG protagonist, one of the all-time best. As I discussed in my last video, the trick with him is that his personality is well defined enough that players know what to expect from him, but still malleable enough to provide them with 2 or more choices for most major decisions. And while that worked for the previous Witcher trilogy, it still has to be very restricting for the writers. By passing the steel and silver swords over to a custom character, CD Projekt Red would open up countless story paths and role-playing options that never would have been possible with Geralt. Ever wanted to flip off a dickhead client after completing a contract? Geralt would probably just make a sarcastic comment, collect his money, and walk away. But your custom character totally could. Hell, you could even play an altruistic Witcher Knight, like the Griffin School tried to be before their fall, and make a point of refusing payment everywhere you go. Sure, Geralt can do this, but in some cases it feels out of character, whereas your custom protagonist could make it their calling card. That having been said, there are plenty of issues with this approach, chief among them the fact that this would be a significant departure for the Witcher series. Playing these games with Geralt at the helm has always felt like we're the conductor of a train that's firmly on the tracks, with the majority of choices boiling down to when and where to turn. A custom character would be more akin to taking on the open road, and though such a game would be full of possibilities, a more focused, character-driven experience is what we've come to expect from our journeys on the continent. One of the best things about The Witcher 3 is watching Geralt learn to be a father for a daughter who's come of age, who no longer needs him to be her guardian, but rather a mentor and supporter. It wouldn't be impossible to tell these types of stories with a custom character, but it sure would be a hell of a lot harder. People take ownership over these types of characters, turning them into a sort of self-insert, and while that mindset is understandable, honestly, it's part of the appeal, it creates a problem in that the audience might be resistant to the direction the developers decide to go with them, especially come Witcher 5 or Witcher 6. As I'm writing this, I'm reminded of the DLC packages for Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which really irritated me because I just didn't see my version of Cassandra ever wanting to be a mother, and thus my interest in those expansions dropped off a cliff from the very beginning. I could also see some folks viewing it as a bit of a cop-out. I think it would be wise to sidestep the debate between Ciri and Geralt and blaze a new trail, but I must admit that failing to follow up on the events of Witcher 3 at all, which leaves a few crumbs of story for Geralt and massive narrative potential for Ciri, would indeed be a missed opportunity. As a writer myself, who's explored the possibilities of a future for Witchers on the continent in my own TRPG campaigns, it does feel a bit like leaving a juicy steak and a Guinness on the table. Overall, I think a custom character, whether it's a structured leading man or woman with a customizable backstory like Shepard, a choose-your-own-adventure star like the hero of Ferelden, or a more fixed but bendable figure like Greed Falls to Sarday, is a strong possibility for the protagonist of Witcher 4. Personally, I'd rate it as the second most likely path for CD Projekt Red to take, with Ciri still up at the top spot. But there are other possibilities. So I hope you'll join me next time as we consider what the game might look like if a young Vesemir were to step into the leading role. Thanks for watching. Huge thanks to Ellen Storm for allowing me to use her covers from the Witcher soundtrack for these videos. Big shout out to James Pruitt, Raven Lampkin, Corey Matson, Gustavo Balabi, Reed, and Pathonian, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys on Friday for my character analysis video on Amir.